Hello everybody. The ocean is probably very loud, huh? So loud that you maybe can't hear me. Here I am, I'm back at the ocean. I'm in La Jolla, California. And I love it out here. And I came down to do a little photography while I was down here in Southern California. So I've been out all morning. It's, what time is it? It's 9:30 a.m. So I've been out here since about 6:30, making photos of pelicans and gulls, and just having a blast out here. Weather's perfect, it's gorgeous. Here comes a gull in for landing. There they are, the gulls. I've been shooting all morning, and I just barely got out the little video camera, the GoPro here. I didn't feel like making a video today. My plan was to come out and shoot a vlog out here, but when I got here, I just started shooting photos, and I didn't want to get distracted, I guess, by making video out here. So I didn't. So I apologize for that, because it would have been, I think, an interesting video. I had a fun morning shooting birds. So I've mostly been shooting here with the D850 and the 500mm PF lens, which is awesome, and just having a blast. So I think, since I didn't vlog this, maybe this will be a good time to get in front of the computer and process a couple of images from today, and just show you maybe just a couple of images, how I'm going to work through them and get them all processed and done. So that's what I'm going to do in lieu of making a normal vlog out here today. Sorry, I just didn't feel like doing it. I just wanted to make photos today, so that's what I did. But anyway, so now I'll cut to a me at a desk with a computer sequence. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy the processing video, because I haven't done one of those yet. With Lightroom, see how it goes. I think some are going to turn out all right. Okay, see you later. I'm coming in hot with the voiceover here. I stole that line from Evan Raft. Check out his channel. If you haven't seen that one, I'll link to that in the description. This is the first image. Let's look at some processing. And I think I selected just a handful of images from this shoot in La Jolla to process. And most of these are going to be very simple. I like to keep it simple so I can breeze through these and not spend a ton of time doing processing. If I was to be making a big print of these, I would spend a little more time doing some fine tuning. But for the most part, this is kind of my workflow and my process. I want to be able to blast through these images pretty quickly, so I'm not spending all day at the computer obsessing over every little minute detail. You know, if I'm going to do a big print of them, then I want to obsess over the details. But for the most part, you know, I'm just going to process these and use these for Instagram and YouTube videos and things. So I want to be able to blast through them quickly and keep the processing simple. So this is a brown pelican, and I've got a bright scene. I expose this to be as close to white as I can get. You can see on the histogram over here, I'm very close to that right edge, but no highlights are blown. First thing I want to do when I start with an image is look at the crop. And in this case, the crop is pretty good, but I am going to take just a little bit of this dead space out of the top. I don't want this to get too close to the edge here, these feathers. So this is about good. I think this eyeball being pretty close to dead center works for that crop, so not much to do there. I'm going to go, as I imported this, it defaults to Adobe Color on every image I bring in. I'm going to actually look at this as a landscape profile, which seems to add a little bit of contrast and a little bit of saturation. And you can see it brought out a little more of the blues that were there. So there it is in just the regular color profile. Here it is in landscape. So it gave me a little more saturation, a little more of the blue. I do think this is a bit overexposed, so I'm just going to take that down. I went a little too far, so I like that at minus 0.5 on exposure. Let's zoom in at 1:1 here and look at that. So it looks good. There's a lot of detail in there, obviously. It actually, I think with as much detail as there is in this bill, I think it looks a little bit crunchy. So I'm going to take this clarity down. I think this was in beautiful soft light, and I think I want to kind of soften the image a little bit. So I'm just kind of playing with this clarity a little bit, and I seem to like it at minus 25. It just softens things up just a little bit, takes the edge off, and everything's still nice and sharp, softens the image. I think it looks good. And then I think ideally I would like a little more saturation in that blue sky. I'm happy with the saturation of the bird and the bill pouch, but let's play with a little bit of vibrance. Vibrance kind of boosts the saturation of colors that aren't particularly saturated, whereas saturation just boosts all the colors the same. So I kind of like that. Looks like plus 20 on vibrance looks good. It brought out a little more of the blues, a little more of the yellows up there. And that's, I think, a final image for me. It's done. It looks good. So let's go to the next one. Here's another pelican. Totally different situation. This one's laying down. I was very close. I used a foreground element to blur out this part of the bird down at the bottom of the frame. And same thing, I would start with the crop here, but I think I don't need to even touch the crop. I like the way it looks right now. I'm going to go to my profile and try the landscape again. Yep, that looks a lot better. Added a lot of saturation and some more contrast. So I like that a lot. I actually feel like maybe it's a little too warm on the white balance. So as shot, I was shot on the cloudy setting in my camera. I'm going to go take that to daylight. And that looks better to me. Might be a little bit too much magenta in there. So I'm going to just take that down to 0. Okay, so I like that. I think I do still want a little more contrast than what it's giving me here. So let's play with this contrast slider. I'm going to bump that up to like 50 and see how that looks. So that contrast added some saturation as well. I think 50 is a little too high. Let's go to 25 there. That looks pretty good. And then clarity again, like I think all this is really crunchy. And so I want to try and soften that up a little bit. Again, it's nice and soft down here at the bottom of the image. The background's all nice and soft with the bokeh, and I think the image, the light is soft. Everything is about it's kind of soft, except it's a little crunchy here. So I think minus 25 on clarity is going to soften that up a little bit. Looks good. And I could consider adding some more saturation there. No, that's too much. I'm just going to leave that saturation alone. Looks good. I'm going to experiment with a little bit of vignette here. And then 5 and 15, that's too much. I think a little vignette there, minus 10. Looks pretty good. And I think I'm going to call that one another finished image. Okay, next image. This is a Harriman Skull. I believe that's what it is. I'm not a gull expert, but I think this is a adult Harriman Skull. And a beautiful animal, beautiful background. The crop's a little funky here, so that's the first thing I'm going to address. And I don't know what I was doing here, but I probably had my center focus point active and focused right on his eyeball and then just didn't recompose it for whatever reason. So that's a little bit of a mistake there that costs me a little bit of extra time in processing, right? So I'm going to crop this down, I think, about right there. I actually might experiment with that tilting a little bit. How's that look? I actually want to push his head a little further back that way in the frame. Give me a little more space over here for him to look into the frame. Let's see how that looks. Cool. I like that. Okay, So this one was shot at a cooler white balance, but I actually feel like I want it even a little bit cooler. I want this stuff to be very white, and you can see over here on the histogram that white part of his head still has a bunch of yellow in it, so it's still a pretty warm white. So I'm just going to take a little bit of that warmth out of here and really make this white head look beautiful and kind of work better with this blue sky here. So I like this. I'm going to go again, I'm going to try this landscape profile, and it didn't change much there, but I do like the blue, the color of the blue a little bit better in that landscape profile, so I'm going to keep that there. How's my exposure look? I'm going to click that up a third of a stop, back down. I like what it's doing to the eyeball. Brings out a little more detail in that eyeball. That looks pretty good at plus 0.3. I like how that works. Yep, that looks good at plus 0.3. I think again, it's a nice soft image. I'm going to take a little bit of clarity out of there. How about minus 20 there? It's super subtle. I'm not seeing much of a difference there. I see it a little bit down here in that feather detail. So I'm going to go back, hit that at minus 20. It just softens up that a little bit, and I think I like the way that looks softer. Obviously, all this stuff is an artistic choice. You might disagree with my artistic choices, but I just kind of want to show you my workflow and my thought process when I'm blasting through a bunch of images, trying to get them processed to get out to YouTube and Instagram. So anyway, back to this one. Again, I'm going to experiment with a vignette. I don't think I'm going to need it because it's already darker over here just with the natural background and darker over here with the natural coloration of the bird. So a vignette's really going to just kind of darken down these corners a little bit, and I'm not sure if I'm going to like that look. I think that's too much, minus 10. So minus 5 or 0. I actually like minus 5. I think that looks good. And then bang, there's another done image. Cool. All right, let's go to, this one's a little trickier. So this one is a different lighting situation where I had more of a very side-lit, kind of almost backlit bird with a dark background. So this one I think is a little bit trickier to visualize what I want it to look like in the end. But again, I'm going to start with a crop, and I'm going to center the bird. Bang. So I can just use this little center tick mark to try and get that thing perfectly centered, because I kind of want that symmetry. I want to leave a little bit of space above his head there, room for his head to breathe. And then I think that's, I'll check my angle here. I'm going to draw a vertical line down the middle of his bill there, and that'll straighten that out 0.51 degrees. Okay, so there it is. That's cropped the way I want. Now let's start working on what it's going to look like. I think I don't want to go with the landscape profile here. Yeah, that doesn't help me. So I'm just going to leave it here at this color and go from there. I'm going to definitely want to brighten this up. So I've got some very bright highlights up here in some of this feather detail, the backlight. But I'm going to go brighten this whole thing up. Let's go a half a stop, continue to work on that. I definitely want to add some contrast. I want to keep this background darker and kind of bring up some of these highlights. So this contrast should accomplish that. Right about there, like right about 50 looks pretty good. It kind of re-darkened that background, really punched up these highlights, but none of that is getting blown out in the highlights there. How about some clarity? I think here's one where clarity is going to look good. I think the clarity is going to add a bunch of fine detail contrast up into here and down into these feathers down here, but let's see how it looks. Let's crank in like 20. So let's see how it's really, I'm darkening that back down. It's 25. So 25 looks good. It really brightens up those kind of details and stuff in the bill. And I think I want a little more saturation here too. Let's crank that up. 10's probably plenty. I don't need to go a whole lot more than that. And then I'm going to punch in some vignette here too, just to really make sure these corners are darkened. Yeah, so it takes some of the background detail out of there just with a -10 vignette. I do see a little, there's a little piece of feather or something there that is flying by. I'm just going to use the spot removal tool. Bang, that thing's gone. And that looks good to me. I kind of like that. Yep, that looks good. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so here's one where I'm going to crop out this entire bird. So the photograph is of this bird, and it's an interesting pose there. And so I'm going to go for that bird only. So I'm just going to take this right to the edge there. Now that this whole bird is gone, and then I'm going to leave a bunch of space in this part of the frame, and let's look at that. That looks pretty good. I'm actually going to crop a little bit more out of the top here, so there's less space here than there is space below him. Okay, cool. I like that crop. Here we are again where I think this image is a little bit too warm here at that white balance, so I'm going to drop that down. And it changes that color, and it looks pretty good. I'm going to add in, it's a hair green. See how that green is kind of punching up there in that sky? I'm going to just add a little bit more magenta in there to this blue. I like that, that hue of blue a little bit better. Now let's go crank in our landscape setting. Bang. So that really changes the color of the blue there. It goes from, there's the regular color profile, and here's the landscape profile. And I think that's a lot better. It adds some saturation in it. It changes the color of that blue a little bit. I like that. I want to really emphasize the white of this head. So I'm going to take this highlight slider and crank that up a little bit. And let's see how that looks. So it is brightening up the blue sky as well. But let's set that at 45. See how that looks. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's experiment with the clarity a little bit. If I crank that up, I don't like that look at all. If I soften it, I don't think that's helping me. So let's just leave that at 0. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I think I do want a little vignette. I feel like this corner is a little bit bright. Maybe just the change in the color of the sky. Maybe there was a little cloud way in the background or something there. But let's try -5 is certainly enough. -10 looks a little weird. But -5 just takes the edge off of that little brighter spot up high. I'm going to lift the shadows. This seems maybe a hair dark, and some of this stuff, I'm going to just experiment with that a little bit and see if, yeah, I do like that. So I get, you know, back down to 0, and then if I lift those shadows, I'm going to take that, yeah, like, let's try it right about there. I think that looks pretty good. His eye looks better now. A little more detail in the feathers. So I think that looks good. Let's call that one done. Let's move on to another one. Another of these beautiful gulls with their bright red beaks and the area around their eyeball. So this one isn't as sharp as I would like it to be. It's certainly sharp enough for Instagram and for YouTube, but this isn't one that I would consider sharp enough to print large. But first thing I notice right off the bat is I have an unlevel horizon. So let's go straight there and figure that out. I'm just going to kind of guess. It's kind of a blurry horizon, but so that's pretty leveled out now. And then I want to, ideally I'd like to have this bird in the left side of the frame with a bunch of space out there to the right that it's flying into, empty space out there. And I think that crop looks pretty good. There's a weird, maybe a boat or something was way out there. A little weird color spot out there. Again, if I would address that for a print or a different type of use, but for Instagram or YouTube, I don't know that that is something I would take the time to bother with. But anyway, let's go back to the color profiles and hit a landscape profile. Boom, it just changes that blue and really makes it look nice. So that is really pretty close to looking good. I like the white balance here. Everything looks good. I might, well, I don't know if those highlights need to be bumped up a little bit or not. I think I'm going to adjust the shadows up a little bit. Let's go to like 50. Now I just get more feather detail. And I think that looks really good. It's still nice and contrasty, and I've got real nice darks and real nice bright highlights. So I think that looks pretty darn good. The only thing, I'm going to take that clarity down again. Kind of soften up. Like if I crank that clarity way up, look what happens to the background. All the waves and stuff in the background get real kind of just harsh and yucky. And you know, there they are way over softened, and you get some weird effects on the bird that I don't like. But I definitely like the softer look, especially in the background. So let's go back to 0. That's what it looks like straight out of the camera. I think -20 looks good. I'm not affecting anything weird in the bird, but it is just taking the edge off of those little background bokeh. So I think that looks, maybe it's a little too soft. Let's go to -10. Yep, that looks good. I'm not going to do a vignette there. I don't want to really darken the crashing waves down here. So let's call that one good. So here we are, next image. This is of an egret with the 500mm PF lens. Pretty close, so this was probably minimum focus distance, around 10 feet. Excellent detail here in the feet and the scaly legs, and depth of field is very shallow, even at f5.6. This other leg is out of focus over here. But let's start with a crop. I find this black thing up here distracting, and I'd like to, I think, crop most of that out. So I don't necessarily want to leave this aspect ratio, because if I crop this out this way, I lose a bunch of this interest up here that kind of tells a little more of a story of what this animal is, being an egret. So I think the answer here is to crop it as an 8x10, and then that crops out most of that. And I still leave the edge of this rock here, which I think is nice. This could probably also work pretty well just as a square. I think it would be fine, but I like that 4x5 crop better. Okay, so there's my crop. I like that. Let's go to the landscape profile again. That gave it some extra saturation. I think it's now a little bit too warm in color balance, so let's take that down, cool that off a little bit. That looks good. I'm going to go a little added exposure here. And I'm going to take the highlights down a little bit. This is looking a little bit too bright to me, so let's take that a little bit out. Bring some of that detail back in there. This one I'm going to add some clarity. It might, you know, if you look at the background and you add a bunch of clarity, I don't like the way that looks, but I think I do want a little more clarity to bring out a little more of the detail in this foot and this leg and a little bit up here. So let's go down here and do 5, 10, 15, 20 looks fine. I don't think it's had a detrimental effect on the background. I think I want to punch in a vignette here to kind of burn down this corner and that corner. Let's see. 10 looks good. That's plenty. And that's that. Yep, I think I would call that a finished image. Okay, so that's kind of what it is. So I just blew through, how many images there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 images, and I'm talking my way through that, so that takes a lot longer to talk through that, but I could crank through those 7 images in 15 minutes or so and get kind of the rough version done. And then I can always go back in and fine-tune and tweak and adjust those as necessary for printing if I need to. But that's my simplest version of the workflow. Landscape photos can be a bit trickier as you're kind of throwing in more graduated neutral density filters. This is kind of my general workflow, how I like to just blast through images quickly and get them processed and move on to other stuff. So I hope this was helpful. I had people, over a long period of time asking for some questions on my workflow and how I process images. And this is kind of a first initial glimpse into my simplest form of my workflow here. So I hope that answers some of your questions. Feel free to ask some more down below. And then if this kind of thing is helpful, I can certainly do some more of these and tackle some of the more difficult to process images and show you what that looks like as well. But in the meantime, take care, and please visit my website if you are interested in joining me for a workshop here in the Tetons, interested in doing some photography and or processing. I do all of the above in my workshops, whatever you as the client want help with photographically. So contact me through my website and check there for prints as well if you're interested in purchasing any prints. So have a great day. Thanks for watching. We'll get back to another vlog here soon enough. All right, take care. Bye.